Morning. So good to see all of you this morning. Those of you at home probably don't know, but I have a full auditorium this morning. Well, you know, you can dream, right? All right. The first thing I'm going to tell you is I made numerous mistakes in my slides. I admit to that. It was a spelling problem with my spell checker. So, yeah. Well, it's the name of the book and everything all gets messed up. So I want you to know this morning we're not talking about Psalms 46. We're talking about Psalm 46. Wherever you see a plural of psalm, just read it as psalm and forget the S's there. And then I won't feel as so bad about making all of these horrible mistakes. So I told Brian I felt underprepared this morning. I hope all of you are prepared to help carry the class. So I'm looking forward to your numerous comments. I'll also tell you that one of my hearing aids isn't working this morning, so I may have to borrow one of Linda's. But we will get through it. So if you're on my left side, I may not hear you. So jump up from your seat, wave your arms, and that will catch my attention, and I'll read your lips. So you have been warned. Psalm 46, which somebody must have played with the slides because they're not working. Oh, is it? Okay. Oh, you know what happens? The one up here doesn't work. That's good. We're all right. No worries. Okay. So, there it is. My phone comes up all the time with this breaking news. You ever see that on your phone? The front's breaking news. And I'm wondering, what is it this time? You know? Well, in the past month, there have been all kinds of breaking news alerts. You know, a long time ago, man bites dog. That was breaking news. I know we remember that. But what is breaking news? I don't get it. I've never figured out what breaking news is. Is it what got broken? That's my first question. The news. I'm afraid the news has been broken for some time. So, but you know, is there any new news? Anybody seen any new news lately? Now, I understand there's a new cookie place in Niceville. Why wasn't that in the paper? Well, I was kind of hoping, you know, if there's a new cookie place in town, we need to know these things. Now, that would be breaking news. You know? I don't know if any of you listen to talk radio. It's a bad habit. And they have this commercial. It's about what's the best time to make it's not, they don't say a disaster plan. I think they say a plan to communicate with loved ones in a disaster. Okay, I think that's how it goes. And then they say, you know, is the best time during an earthquake, and there's all kinds of earthquake sounds in the background, or is the best time when a hurricane is approaching, and of course, you know, you get the wind sound effects, or a tornado, or a wildfire, or a flood, and what they conclude at the end of the commercial, they say, or perhaps the best time is now. Living on the Gulf Coast, we're kind of accustomed to planning for events. You know, every once in a while, we're visited by the south wind, and it'll blow up a hurricane occasionally. We've been rather fortunate over the last few years, knock on, I hope this is real wood, you know, we know how to plan. What are we going to do? Where are we going to go? How much food do we need to have stored up? Is the generator ready to go? You know, all these things that we think about. Of course, some of us would a week away say, oh, we got a hurricane coming, let's go somewhere else. And if you have the luxury to be able to do that, that's great. You know, where do you go? What's your refuge? What, you know, what plan do you make? Where do you get up and go to? You know, we think about those kinds of things, and we wonder, well, you know, what am I going to do? My experience has been that no matter how well you plan, it just never goes the way you planned for it to go. It doesn't matter what it is. Paul was talking about his gallbladder experience earlier. It certainly didn't go the way he planned for it to go. Rhonda paid the doctor, I know. But, you know, we just have things like that. Things just don't always work out, you know. Nolan and Connie came down from West Virginia to get to warm weather. How did that work out for you? Somebody told me that the temperature down in Key West, oh, I know, it was Tammy's mom. She likes that, by the way. He's always talked to her. Oh, it's Tammy's mom. Said the temperature in Key West that day was 85, so that's where she wanted to go. But, yeah, what do you do when things don't go right? And maybe we're going to talk about that a little bit. You know. Psalm 46, it says it's by the sons of Korah. Now, the sons of Korah were Levites. They were the family of Kohath. I know you thought it would be the family of Korah, but it's actually the family of Kohath. In David's time, seems like they served in a musical aspect in the temple worship. If you look at 2 Chronicles 20:19, there's a little bit of stuff in there. One subtitle is God, Our Refuge, of this particular psalm. There's a part of the heading is kind of, you know, Alamoth. It says, according to Alamoth. Now, I don't know if it's Alamoth or Alamoth, but it's a funny word that we don't run across very much. At least not in our casual daily conversation. It doesn't seem to come up. In 1 Chronicles 15:20, it says, Zechariah, Aziel, Sheremoth, Jehiel, Unmi, Elab, Messiah, and Benaiah were to play harps according to Alamoth. So we have a reference to Alamoth in two places in the Old Testament, in Psalm 46 and in 1 Chronicles 15:20. Some people think this is probably a musical term, make a high-pitched song, perhaps be sung by soprano voices. If you look at the CSB, the margin comment says the Hebrew word means young women. And so we probably spent more time on Alamoth than I intended to, but now you are well versed, and so when you run across that term, you'll know more. Now Alamoth has what, 7 letters? So I don't have. How many of you play Wordle? You ever heard of Wordle? It's a word game. Yeah, there's somebody back here. It's 5-letter words. You get 6 guesses to figure out what the 5-letter word is, and you get 1 word a day if you play by the classical rules. And so I don't have to worry about Alamoth being one of the 5-letter words that I have to know. As a matter of fact, I've been told that we really only have to know 2,400 of them. So if you memorize those, you got it made. But so why this psalm? Where does this fit? A lot of the psalms are standalone, and some of them are linked together. We've noted that a few times. But why this psalm? Well, one thing I want to suggest to you is that most of the time, the Israelites were weak and afraid. They really were. You know, you think about this massive group of people, these Israelites, and how many of them there were, and we think, well, that's just, a massive group of people. But most of the time, when we read about the Israelites, they're not doing too well. They did seem to have more than their fair share of trouble. They got to wander in the wilderness for 40 years because a few of them doubted. They didn't have faith. It's amazing to me sometimes when we go back and look at what the Israelites experienced, just what they actually did. It's interesting to me that when the Israelites did as God commanded, they seemed to do pretty well. There's a lesson there, I think, that we probably need to pay some attention to. If we do what God has to say, we'll probably do okay. David saw a lot of this trouble firsthand. He kind of experienced it from inside the camp and outside the camp. And so most of David's Psalms were of a personal nature. In other words, God saved me. God helped me. God was there in my time of need. God, I sinned and I got to get it right. Kind of based on what he had done. This particular psalm is written for the entire nation of Israel. But yeah, they got their fair share of trouble. And they had unquestionably a hot and cold relationship with God. I mean, you think about how long that the law got stored down in the basement before it finally got found. I mean, just think about this kind of stuff. I mean, how many years went by? Look at the time. Oh, well, 7 kings ago they had this law and they put it down here in the basement to keep it safe. Problem is that they kept forgetting about this stuff. And it just, anytime Israel lost, it was because there was sin in the camp. They weren't doing what they were told. They got punished. All right, let's get into the psalm, and we'll talk about that. And this is your opportunity to contribute and help with this lesson this morning. I'm working out of the Christian Standard Bible again. Verse 1 says, God is our refuge and strength, a helper who is always found in times of trouble. Instead of beginning with a problem, this psalm starts with a solution. Pretty different, huh? Yeah, the solution is right in front of us, right when we begin, But what's here? It says, God is our refuge and strength. What is that? What is refuge? Well, it's a safe place. It's a safe place. It's somewhere that you can go to be safe. In this particular environment, for the Israelites, really the only safe place for them was when they were in tune with God. And it says, God is our refuge. When you lived in a walled city, that city kind of protected you. It was your refuge, but it wasn't perfect. I'm sure that the residents in Jericho thought that they had the perfect refuge. Paul?
Living in tents had to have some fear of not having a structure around them. A tent is not necessarily a good device to keep a bear out or a lion out or any attacker out. So they'd feel that vulnerability in that position. But when they leaned on God, their tents were tents of steel, rather than tents of fabric. So that's whenever you see the Israelites lean on God and trusting Him, they gained strength and they believed it. It's like Joshua went, and doing being the one that comes back and we can take this, we can do this, let's go get it done now, and other people, the other men there are saying, well, we can't do this, these guys are giants.
Paul's pointing out, he's got a good point. When the Israelites were moving around, they were living in tents. Now, a tent is not the most secure environment, as Paul noted, but he said when they were in tune with God, when they were hooked in with God, those tents were tents of steel, and that's a really good point, and so they made some mistakes, but when they were tuned in with God, He was their refuge and strength. This certainly wasn't a piece of fabric that was a tent. And it says, He's a helper who's always found in times of trouble. That's the problem. What happens when we get in trouble? Well, then we think about God. When the Israelites got in trouble, then they thought about God. Oh, yeah. Think about that. What happens? Well, and the problem with society today is everything's all great. Everything's coming up roses until it's not. And then that's when we just need to think, perhaps I'll pray. Perhaps I'll look to God. Perhaps I'll let God back into my life. Verse 2 says, Therefore, leaning on verse 1, therefore we will not be afraid, though the earth trembles and the mountains topple into the depths of the seas, though its water roars and foams and the mountains quake with its turmoil. Selah. That term Selah, we'll see that a lot in Psalms. It really is kind of a stop and rest and think about it. So when you see Selah, go back and review, stop for a minute and think, God Himself was a help for the Israelites. Not from a distant, but a present help. This description here is a very catastrophic situation, I'm sure you would agree. The whole earth is shaking, the mountains are falling into the sea, the water is rising, and we don't have an ark. Oh, wait a minute. That's when people think. But the psalmists here, they conjured up probably to them what was the most frightening event they could think of. And then they said, even in spite of something as catastrophic as this event, we don't need to fear because God is our refuge and our strength. No matter how bad it is or how bad it gets, God is reliable. I want us to remember that because that's an important concept, and I don't want everyone to forget that just as God was a refuge and strength for the Israelites, He's a refuge and strength for us today. And that is an important aspect. Verse 4 through 6. There is a river. Its streams delight the city of God, the holy dwelling place of the Most High. What was the city of God? Jerusalem. Jerusalem was a city of God. How many rivers run through Jerusalem? 1, 2, 3. There are no rivers running through the city of Jerusalem. There are a few streams. Hezekiah actually built an aqueduct to get to a spring below the city, and that's the water that, took care of the city. But there are no rivers in Jerusalem. The rivers that the passage is talking about really represent the ever-flowing presence of the blessings of God. That's what this particular river refers to. So God's blessings are present in the city. And that's kind of the thought. Verse 5 says, God is within her. She will not be toppled. God will help her when the morning dawns. That's an interesting passage. The city of God is happy with the life-giving waters, the blessings that are present to them. Water is an important substance in a desert. And most of the time the Israelites were wandering in the desert. The area around Jerusalem, the area in that area, it's a dry, arid place. And because of that, water is a commodity that is very welcome. And so, when this water is present, everything is great. God's blessings are everything to us. The city is secure. It says right here, God is in her. She won't be toppled. Everything is good. The help when the morning dawns, that's an interesting observation, I think. I wasn't really sure. I was trying to see how does this fit in the context. So, there might be a couple of thoughts that tie into this morning dawn. One of them is the weakest time for the people is early in the morning. Most enemies raid early in the morning. Everybody's asleep. The guards have been up most of their shift. They're probably fallen asleep, maybe. I don't know. But that's the time when they let their guard down a little bit, is when the morning dawns. Could be, this is when the guard changes, and because there's a change of the guard and there's some turmoil there, another good time for an enemy to attack. So there's a couple different thoughts that you can go with. But basically, God will be there to help. And then verse 6 says, nations rage, kingdoms topple, the earth melts when he lifts his voice. God is in everything, all the time, regardless of the situation. And they're saying, everything around us is turmoil. The geopolitical nature of everything around them, the kings in that portion of the world, they were always fighting over property. They were, I want yours, so I'm going to come in and take it. And the psalmists say, just the sound of his voice, just the sound of his voice is enough to stop the trouble, to stop the problems. (46:7). Now, every once in a while, I come across a passage that says, that would make a really good sermon. This is one of those, what I would call passages. There's so much packed into this verse in Psalm 46:7. The Lord of armies, some versions say the Lord of hosts, is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold. And of course, there's our term, Selah. Let's talk about it and think about it for a minute, because this is one of these things where I can't leave it alone. There's just too much. You know, at the very first line, the Lord of hosts, the Lord is with us. You know, notice that this term, Lord, is Jehovah or Yahweh. And what that means to the Hebrew, in the Hebrew language, Yahweh means God is completely self-sufficient within himself. He does not need anything else. He's completely sufficient. He's without beginning. He's without end. He's unchanging, forever the same. You know, the word hosts or armies. You know, he's the commander of armies of heaven. Who are the armies of heaven? The angels. The angels. You know, they're at his beck and call. One angel by himself could defeat thousands. So think of being able to command an army of angels, each one capable of wiping out thousands of enemy forces. It's really difficult when you think about that. You know, I don't know how big God's army is, but apparently it is sufficient. It's enough. And when you have enough, you don't need any more. You got it. And it says, is with us. This really, first of all, strengthens the idea that God is ever present. Ever present. It echoes back to the kind of the beginning of the psalm, if you will, where we read that God is a very present help in trouble. And of course, we'll see it again. But, you know, is. It didn't say was, didn't say will be, it says is. Is a present tense, isn't it? So, you know, that's to say the Lord of hosts is always with us. It doesn't say he was once with them in the past. It doesn't say that he's no longer with them in this time of trouble. It doesn't say that one day things will get better. What it says is God is with us. That's what it says. When? Now. In the present. In the current. In the battle. In the trial. In any difficulty, God is in it. Now, here's a problem. We have to stop shutting him out. We have to let God work. And sometimes we don't want to do that. Sometimes, instead of letting God work, we decide that we are going to solve the problem. And that's when the trouble really gets started. When we decide that we can control things, when I decide I'm in charge, that's when everything falls apart. Every time. Yes, sir.
I come across personally is when I'm in the battle, I'm uncomfortable. I don't want to deal with it. I want to get out of it as fast as I can. That is why most of the time I try to take charge, because I just want to get through it and get from this deployment and get home to my creature comforts at home with my family.
So what Amon's saying is it's a lack of patience. We want it. We want it now. Exactly. We want it now. So now means let me interject myself into the process and make things happen now. It seldom works, folks. It seldom works. And we might see a temporary solution, but usually it turns out that it didn't work out as well we wanted it to. We've got to remember that God is everywhere now. Heaven, earth. God is even present in hell. You know, there's no place that God is not present. Then, now, tomorrow, forever. You know, I will give you that God does make his presence more fully known in some places. He makes his presence more fully known where his word is rightly preached. I believe that. Where his truth is shared with people. I think he makes himself known more to believers and unbelievers. You know, God is with us all the time. John Knox. Oh, yes, sir.
You know, this is something that my son and I were discussing the other day, and you know, it's difficult to really figure it all out, of course. But how do we know when the Spirit is leading us, when God's Word is leading us, or how can we be assured of that? Because sometimes, like you say, and like Lamont says, you know, we want to help things along. Well, maybe we feel that's what God wants us to do, is help things along a little bit. But sometimes we're wrong on that. So how do you really know? I mean, it's hard to feel like you're being led by the Spirit sometimes, and that it may not be the right thing. You may have taken something on yourself rather than what the Spirit's actually saying for you to do.
Yes.
Well, now we're meddling. I don't know if I can answer that question. I can tell you, I don't know if I can tell you, how do you know when it's not the Spirit leading you when you're trying to interject yourself? I think time is a great trainer. The one thing that we always don't ever have enough of is probably the one thing that might actually help us. We're really bad about managing time. You know, remember, in God's time, there is no time, because that's not a concept that exists in forever. It's just not there. And sometimes we want to hurry things along, and we'll say, well, you know, I feel like God's telling me to do this. I don't know. David?
What James had in mind when he said, pray for wisdom, this kind of question.
And I think that's true. As David pointed out, James says pray for wisdom. I mean, my only answer is pray.
If you try to do it yourself, and God has a different plan in mind, he has ways of letting you know that that may not be the right path you're headed down, or you maybe are going a little too quickly, or he has a lot of ways to slow you down.
You know, I just think we figure it out eventually. You know, after we've hit our head against the wall a few times, we figured out we're not moving the wall. We better check Plan B, which should have been Plan A all along, Kathy.
Yes, when we realize how much better our lives are, because God has been handling things for us. We haven't stepped in to do, you know. And then I think our lives do become better in the fact that I had a realization. I said, my problems with my supervisor at work led me to fully trust in God. And when we're trying to do it for ourselves, we're not fully trusting.
Paul.
Over here. Over here, please.
Oh, I can't see you, and I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, also when life starts getting harder, this could also mean that you're going in the right direction. Because just as God would try to steer you in the better direction, the devil will continuously try to steer you in the wrong direction. So even when life is getting harder, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going the wrong way. It just means that the devil notices you're going the right way and wants to just pull you back to where he can control you.
And that's an excellent point. Sometimes Satan will interject himself in our lives, and Satan is the greatest liar of all time. As a matter of fact, Satan will often masquerade in place of God. And we need to figure out when that's right. And maybe life isn't getting any easier.
Point back to my son and having this discussion is discernment of what is actually from God and what is not. And as you say, and David praying for wisdom and learning how to read these things, because as Ahmad just said, I think I heard him say is that, God will let you believe a lie. And that is a scary situation. But it's only because he'll let us believe a lie because we press so hard wanting to believe it. And we press so hard against what he says that if we're silly enough to believe those things, he'll let you believe it.
That's a very fair observation. God will let us believe an untruth. But usually because we've already weakened ourselves to the point we're willing to accept it, and maybe it sounds like it's what we wanted to do. Amon?
A point too, but I have one as well.
I was just going to say, the lie is always going to look way better than whatever the truth we want to try to steer away from is. The lie is always going to be more tempting. It's always more appealing. It looks just so much fun. And the truth is not always going to look like that. So it's so easy. It's so much easier to believe that lie because it's just there.
Maybe you should be sitting right here. So I don't miss these important points. Yeah, the lie is usually more attractive. Yeah. Did you know that it's easier to have fun, even though it might not be the best thing for us?
And the point was also put out in the book of Daniel, in the midst of his issues and problems. I think the angel's name was Gabriel or Michael, but he says, I was dispatched to give you wisdom and discernment to the situation that you're dealing with. Because Daniel wanted to get out quick. He knew who God was, but he says, hey, listen, I need help. Because the lies were there, the deception was there, the easy way out was there. But he's like, listen, I'm here to give you wisdom and discernment. That's when you talk in wisdom and discernment on to get out of your situations or to push yourself through situations. Yeah.
So as Amon points out, Daniel wanted out of his situation, but he knew it wasn't God's will. And sometimes we just have to work through it, but understand that God's still in charge. John Knox, who was a Scottish reformer, he says, 1 plus God makes a majority. If God's with you, that's it. That's all you got to have. We just need not to shut the door, and that, unfortunately, is sometimes what we do. And when we try to take things in our own hands, sometimes we shut the door, and that isn't a good thing. My parking. All right. Verses 8 and 9. Come, see the works of the Lord who brings devastation on the earth. He makes war cease throughout the earth. He shatters bows and cuts spears to pieces. He sets wagons ablaze. If you are not on God's side, look out. You are in trouble. And you're in trouble real quick. And all of these things that we try to fix on our own, change on our own, we need to know that we don't want to be on anybody else's side, and We don't want anybody else on our side. God is always on our side. Always. But if we shut him out, if we listen to the devil because it sounds like it's more fun, and we decide, oh, well, that's the direction we're going to go, look out. Look out. We're going to be in trouble. God can bring peace to the whole world, but you know what? He's got to purify it first. You know? And nothing makes this more clear than John's revelation.
A while, you can look back on your life and things that happened. And it's amazing when you look back and you can see that God was there working all the time. And you didn't need to do half of what you did. The worrying, the this, the that, the other. God was always there all the time working for you. And you can look back and see it so plain, but when you're in it or when you're younger, before you've experienced it, you just can't fathom how it was. So what did you do exactly? Well, when you get older and look back, you know how he does it, why he does it, when he does it.
Ron has got a very good observation. Sometimes when we look back and we're honest about it, you know, God was in control. We may not have seen it at the time. And sometimes we don't see it in the now. And that's when we really need to realize that God is there, is now, in the present. And I think all of our lives are better because God has been in our lives.
Well, number one, I don't put myself in the position to be under very many temptations. You know, I come here and I go home. I come here. This is my favorite place. This is my favorite time. And so it might be because of where I am in my life that I feel really.
There's no place that I would rather be than with my Christian brothers and sisters. Nowhere. I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be. And that's Kathy's observation. You know, God is going to destroy nations that don't comply. We need to realize that. You know, we need to look back over the battlefield and see where God has truly been in charge, and He has been. Let's go through the rest of this psalm real quick. Stop fighting and know that I am God, exalted among the nations, exalted on the earth. You know, that'd make a good song, wouldn't it? The Lord of armies is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold. We need to understand. Stop fighting and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. That is not a suggestion. It doesn't say, quiet down and you'll discover God. What it says is quit what you're doing right now and acknowledge who God is. That's what that says. And we need to remember that all the time. God does not promise a world free of trouble, but provides help in times of trouble. Troublesome times will come. Romans 8:28 says, God works for the good of those that love Him. Revelation 22:1-6 says, God offers us an eternal, trouble-free existence. God is here now. God was here yesterday, and God will be here forever. Thank you so much.